Hi everyone, welcome newcomers and Salonista to Jaime and Robin Salon, with a guest appearance from Greg Trout, who's there somewhere on childcare duty. I am Marty, the founder and director of the salon, and in my day job I'm an academic who teaches compassion mainly with nursing and medical students. I am really passionate about the power of compassion and how we can integrate it into innovative curriculum and throughout society. So I'm really excited about education, obviously, in tonight's salon. The salon, for those who are newcomers, is a compassionate initiative whose purpose is to provide a home and community around new and established authors and poets whose work relates to compassion and well-being. It is a place for people to connect, inspire and support, using books and poems to consider various aspects of human existence in an increasingly fragmented and challenging global community. You can find further details on the website. Holly will be putting all sorts of things in the chat and on social media. And if you like our Eventbrite space, you'll be alerted to future events. So it's just wonderful to see you here. Please relax, get a drink, enjoy the evening ahead. In terms of practicalities, your microphones are muted so we can concentrate on Jaime and Robin's salon. But please put your cameras on so we can see your lovely faces, and then wait until the end of the conversation to write in the chat, and Holly will provide any links or anything that Jaime or Greg or Robin talk about. Holly will put that in the chat, and we have a number of Compassion Salon people here around the place that can jump in if anyone needs any help. We're also recording the salon, so turn your camera off if you do not wish to be filmed. Our next salon is on the 29th of June with author Anne Wilson, discussing her book, A Place for Everything, My Mother, Autism and Me. And we would, as always, like to thank the Royal Society of Arts, who we collaborate with, but also who give us our Zoom home, which is brilliant, and the University of Edinburgh chaplaincy, in particular, Reverend Dr. Harriet Harris, who is there somewhere. Hi Harriet, for her and their continued sponsorship and support. So to tonight's salon, there is, as many of us know, an unprecedented demand for mental health support for our young people before actually COVID and during, and I'm not sure if I can say we're after or not, but where we are now, support for our young people. So how do we create a culture of kindness in our classrooms? How do we create compassion? That's an interesting question in itself. So Jaime and Robin are going to help us with that tonight. Jaime is the author of Kindness, the Little Thing That Matters Most, and the Kindness Journal. She was named Clarins Woman of the Year 2016 and has received a Points of Life Award from the UK Prime Minister and a Richmond Community Award for her work. She was named in the Independent's Happy 50 list in 2018, an alternative rich list that celebrates people who make life better for others. Jaime's work has also been promoted by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in celebration of organisations that create a sense of togetherness and community. Robin is head of the School of Psychology and a professor of developmental psychology at the University of Sussex. He leads the CRESS, Children's Relationships, Emotions and Social Skills Research Lab, which conducts investigations of children's social and emotional functioning, and he works closely with practitioners and policymakers in the areas of education and mental health. He founded the Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness, an interdisciplinary research centre focused on illuminating the nature of kindness and its impacts on people and communities. Professor Banerjee recently led the world's largest ever public science project on kindness, the Kindness Test, in partnership with the BBC. So each salon begins with a poem chosen by the author, and sometimes also ends with one as well. So we'll see how we do for time tonight. So we begin with Be the Kind of Person by Nagita Jill. Be the kind of person who isn't afraid to ask someone if they are okay twice, if they say they are, but look like they aren't. Be the kind of person who smiles at people, even if they don't smile back. Be the kind of person you wished for when no one was there for you. Be the kind of person who is brave enough to stand alone in a crowd for what is right, Be that person, because we need more people like that in the world. Be that person, because people like that are rarer than the rarest diamonds and gold. So, Robin and Jaime, I think you are those people. You are that person. So I will hand you over for your salon. Thank you so much, Jaime and Robin.
Oh, thank you, Marty. That's so lovely. What a lovely introduction. What a lovely poem to start us off with. That's great. So, I mean, Jaime, I don't know, where are we going to start with this? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because I guess the thing that's kind of on my mind is, how did we both get into it? I don't know, Jaime, do you want to share how you started thinking about kindness? How did you come to write a book on it?
I think, you know what, Robin, I think mine started a bit the other way around. I wasn't really thinking about kindness when I started 52 Lives, which is a kindness charity. So it seems a bit odd that I was thinking about helping specific people. And as we started doing that, and as the charity grew, I started thinking more about kindness, and I started reading more about kindness, and we started collaborating more with people doing research into kindness. And you know, I think the more I've learned about kindness, you know, looking back now, it made me understand so many of the decisions that I made. So for example, when I wanted to start the charity, when I was prompted to start the charity, it was just after I'd helped a lady who needed help with, you know, she was a woman who'd fled domestic violence, and she was starting over again with nothing. And I did some small things to help her, and felt really amazing. And you know, at the time, I don't think I just thought, oh, that felt really nice. And but it's only been later that I've learned a lot more about the science of kindness and the impact it has on our mental health and our physical health, and that I realized why I felt that way and why I felt motivated to do more, because that, you know, that's the impact that kindness has on your.
It does, doesn't it? It's the feeling that you get when you're involved in it yourself. I mean, it just makes such a difference. And it's weird because on the one hand, you feel like something like this is fundamentally about reaching out to other people, and all the focus is on helping others or benefiting others or trying to do something that's basically supporting others' welfare. And yet you've got that really interesting thing where you actually get something from it as well. But it doesn't change it, right? That original motivation is still focused on the other person, right?
I just think it means it's a win for everybody. It means you're doing something nice to help other people, and it has, you know, health benefits for yourself as well. I don't think there's a downside if you get something back from being kind.
Absolutely, win-win.
But in terms of our so the charity, we also run a school of kindness. So we run free kindness workshops in primary schools for Key Stage 1 and 2, and that started kind of a bit like the charity. Actually, it was a bit accidentally almost. I was asked to give some talks in my children's primary school just about the charity, and I was talking to the kids in an assembly about some of the people we were helping, and the questions that were coming back from the children were, they were just so curious about the people that we were helping, and they wanted to know who we were helping that week. And it happened to be a little girl who we were trying to organize a birthday for, this little girl who'd been through a really hard time. And the children started to say, well, can we do something for her? Could we make her birthday cards, or could we? And so it was very much prompted by the children wanting to get involved in helping. And I just remember thinking, wouldn't it be lovely to do this properly? Because it all felt a bit disjointed. It was like, well, okay, you can make her a, you know, it wasn't an organized workshop. It was just me giving a talk. And then when I won the Clarins Award, it came with prize money, which we were able to use to launch a proper School of Kindness. So that's how the workshop started. And
it's interesting though, because one of the things I wonder about is this the kind of thing where it's like engineering the kindness, like bringing about the kindness in the groups of people who you're going and talking to? Because somehow it doesn't sound like that to me, and that's not been my experience either. It's like it's there already, and you're kind of releasing. Is that even the right way to say it? That you're kind of releasing it from the people that you're speaking with?
That's almost the exact language we're using, because I'm very careful in all of the language of all of our, like we have lesson plans and resources in all the resources in all our workshops. We always try and avoid using the word making somebody, you know, this makes you happy, this makes you this, or somebody being unkind makes you this, because we're very much about choices, and that whatever's going on around you, you can choose how you're feeling. Nothing makes you anything. So we're quite pedantic about that, to the point where I think the people who help write our lesson plans get quite annoyed, because I'm like, every time there's a word make in there, I cross it out, because we talk about how it helps to unlock what's already in there, that helps to unlock the happiness that's in you, it helps to unlock the kindness that's in you. Because we always talk to the kids about how kindness is inside all of us, and happiness is inside all of us, but sometimes it just gets covered up with, negative thinking, or just sometimes I think we can get quite blinkered in our own little world, and it makes us get very insular, which I think can cover all that up. So what we talk to the children about in the workshops is that when we're kind to somebody, it helps to unlock their happiness that's in them, because it can help them bring them out, bring them out of themselves, and help them look up and look out, and make them feel like the world, help them feel, not make, I just broke my own rule, help them feel like the world is a good place. Especially, we talk to kids in kindness workshops. It's easy to talk to kids about being kind to, people who are nice, because when people are nice, it's easy to be nice to them. But there's a section in our workshop where we talk about how we deal with people who are unkind. And that's one of the things we talk to them about if we're, how do we deal with an unkind person? Should we be unkind back to them? That's not very helpful, because I know even with adults, that's what we do quite often. If somebody's rude, you think, well, and we're rude back. So what we try and talk to the children about is that if somebody's being unkind, it's because there's something going on with them. There's something, we don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know what's going on at home. They're obviously, they're a bit angry or a bit sad on the inside. Happy people aren't unkind to people. So we try and help them realize that by being kind to that person, it will help unlock the happiness that's in them, which is a challenging concept even for adults, I think, to actually put into practice.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Because that's one of the things I get asked about as well a lot. Like, what does research say about helping people who in some way don't deserve? And that's quite an interesting loaded word, right? Don't deserve the kindness. And I always talk about how kindness in many ways wouldn't really be contingent on the other person's response. It's not about whether the other person deserves it or not. It's not whether the other person has kind of earned it. Kindness fundamentally is about giving to the other person, isn't it? And it's the feeling of making that connection with the other person. But what I sometimes get in response, I'm curious to know what you think about it, because I bet children might say the same thing as well. What I sometimes get in response is the feeling that, well, then people are going to take advantage of you. That, you're being kind to someone who maybe isn't responding in kind, they're taking advantage of you, and that makes you feel, you could end up being a doormat. So is that easy to counter, do you think?
Yeah, because for me, I think being kind is not about just doing whatever the other person wants you to do. You can have boundaries and be kind, and you can, especially with children, for example, we give them the example of sometimes being kind to an unkind person is just about not responding with unkindness. It's about staying level, holding your ground, not resorting to the way they're behaving. That's a kind response, by giving them a bit of grace, by going, look, I know you're in a bad state of mind, so I'm not going to then resort to. So that's a kind response. It's not about just doing with it whatever the other person wants you to do.
That's really interesting. That's a really great response. That whole point about it being kind of like in there with everyone, but you can kind of bring that spirit out in some way. And it is a kind of a spirit of compassion that I'm picking up from you as well, that bringing that out, that seems like a really powerful thing. And I'm just wondering, how much does the person need role models around them to do these kinds of acts of kindness? How much do you need to see other people being kind in order for you to be able to do that as well? Because 52 Lives does some really inspirational things that make transformations in people's life, which is one of the things that's been so extraordinary about what you've built up. You said it was an accident, but gosh, you've built up something extraordinary which has transformed people's lives. Do we need that to kind of remind ourselves about kindness, or why can't we just be doing that all the time anyway? Why do we need to have role models showing us that stuff?
I think we can do it without role models, but my goodness, it makes it so much easier if we're surrounded, especially for children. We go in and run a kindness workshop for a school for a couple of hours, and then we leave again. And if if what we're teaching them, and if there isn't a culture of kindness in the school, and if the teachers that are working with the children every day, if their parents who are with them all the time are not modeling that kindness, it's very challenging to get the children to carry on doing it, because I mean, modeling is just the most important way to encourage a child to behave in a certain way, completely. So when we talk about, you know, creating a culture of kindness and compassion in schools, if we're not making sure the teachers are in a supported environment where they feel like they're working in a kind and compassionate environment with leaders in the school who are kind and compassionate, I mean, you're fighting a massively uphill battle, because how can a teacher who's really stressed and unhappy at work be modeling kindness and compassion for children? It's very, I mean, they probably could if they were of a very strong mind, but it makes it an awful lot more difficult.
That's so true. And you know what, Jamie, that's exactly how I got into this area of research as well, because my whole career has been focused, as Marty was saying at the beginning, has been focused on children's social and emotional development. I've been spending quite a lot of time trying to make sense of the relational patterns in children's lives, how they connect with other people and how they sometimes don't connect with other people. I was particularly focused on children's peer relationships, how they connect with each other. And the trials and tribulations that children have to navigate through their lives. I think we've all been there, and we know that there can be some really significant trials and tribulations along the way. But in the course of doing that work, one of the things that I kept encountering was how much schools can be a place where really positive changes can be cultivated. And yet, so much what we were finding in the research over the last 20 years, especially over the last 20 years, was that this cannot be a case of having a brilliant teacher or teaching assistant or a learning mentor or whoever in the school standing up and doing a class with the children and talking about, I don't know, it could be peaceful conflict resolution, or it could be compassion or empathy or kindness or social skills or responsible decision making or whatever. It can't just be running a brilliant class and lesson that's really interactive with the children, because the question I always was coming up against was, where are they going after that class? After they had that brilliant class with that wonderful teacher who's done this really great lesson on, I don't know, peaceful conflict resolution or, you know, empathetic responses to others, where are they going to after that? What's the math class going to be like after that? Or what's the canteen going to be like? Or what the bus on the way home, or whatever it might be? What's it going to be like on the playground? And that's where I think you're absolutely, you know, hit the nail on the head. It's about everybody in the school community experiencing it that way. But the big question for me is, how do you do that? Where do you even start?
Well, has your research, through that research, did you uncover anything to do with that? What, I mean, for example, what would be what are the key things that need to change within schools to help that happen?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because I think some schools, there are already so many things in place which actually foster that sense of well-being, feeling that actually, yeah, the leaders are compassionate, school leaders are compassionate with the staff with the other staff in the school, and it goes both ways, and they're looking after each other, and there is that sense of attention to how people are feeling and responsiveness to that. But the difficult question that you're kind of picking up on is, what do we do if we're feeling like we're not in that place? Where do we even start? And goodness knows, I've been working in schools all my career, and so many different pressures that are on people working in schools. And sometimes it feels like all that work on relationships and well-being and mental health almost feels like an extra. And I'm always trying to say, no, but it's really core. This is fundamental. This is about human relationships. You're going to be better able to access the curriculum if you're in a state of well-being, in a state of actually positive, compassionate relationships with the people around you. But the difficulty is you can't engineer that. So where do you even start with that? So I'm restating your question, Jamie. You know, it is difficult to work out the answers to that. But I think the one thing I would say by way of answering it is, maybe there's a process of unlocking that you were just talking about. I'm going to use your word about unlocking the kindness that's there in everybody and saying, do you know what? It is okay to give this time. It is okay to give this space, because this is core, and it's not going to be taking time away from the other important business that you've got to do in schools. And that maybe that balance, that rebalancing, that reappraisal is what we're all needing to do. Maybe as a society we need to do that. Just recognize that even, maybe especially amidst all the adversity, this stuff really counts.
I guess I think also teaching people about the why, not just, I mean, when we teach our kindness workshops, you know, we talk all about the benefits of kindness and give them examples of people we've helped, and we talk about the social side of it, then we talk to them about the science of kindness, and what happens in your mind and body when you're kind and the impact it has, because we want kids to not just think about kindness as doing, you know, ticking a little box, going, there we go, I did something nice for someone. We want them to, I guess we want to empower them and help them realize that kindness is a tool that they can use to help improve their own physical and mental health. So if they're, you know, in years to come feeling anxious or depressed or whatever it might be, hopefully they'll remember that kindness is one of the ways that they can, you know, change the chemicals in their brains and release all those feel-good chemicals, makes them feel better, helps them live longer. It, you know, it's cardioprotective. It helps lower blood pressure. It does all these things. And I think if they can learn the why and help them understand why they're doing it, maybe they're more likely to carry on doing it, even if it's for selfish reasons. That's fine.
That's very true, isn't it?
It's fine.
But you know, I think in my own work, I kind of do the same thing, because obviously I am a researcher, right? That's what I've been doing for the last 25 years. And it's the thing that seems to turn the dial when I'm engaged with staff in schools. It's the feeling that actually there is some science behind all of this, that relationships and well-being, especially that point I was saying before about relationships and well-being actually going hand in hand with the whole learning agenda, which to me seems really, really obvious. But I know I've encountered colleagues in schools where, you know, one guy said to me, I respect what you're doing, Robin. He said, I totally get it. You're doing really important things. He said, but I just don't have time for all this feeling stuff. He did. He said that. I just don't have time for all this feeling stuff. I've got too much to do with my syllabus. I can't remember if it was a math teacher or a history teacher. I've got too much to do with my history syllabus. But of course, he was the same person, nearly in the same breath, who was saying, of course, I'm spending 50% of my time just trying to control the class, right? And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something we can learn there. Of course, being able to say, you know what, the research evidence makes it really, I mean, we've done this kind of research, makes it really clear that kindness builds relationships, relationships build well-being, and well-being creates the conditions for successful learning. And we've been able to demonstrate that at the individual level and at the school level as well. So there is research there, and that does seem to help.
And you know, when you're in, even just personally, when you're in an environment with people where you feel supported, you're just more likely to put your hand up and say what you're thinking. You take risks because you feel supported. You don't feel like somebody's there who's going to belittle you, or, you know, it's just, oh my goodness, it still baffles me, Robin, that people think it's this thing that gets added on. Where like I can, you know, the well-being stuff will just tack on to the end of the lesson. They don't realize. I think some people still don't get that it needs to be a thread that runs through everything you're doing. And
exactly. So what, I mean, I suppose the big question is, you know, you were talking about having to unlock it because other stuff kind of gets piled on and gets in the way of it. What is that other stuff? What have you found is getting in the way?
I think, I mean, it completely depends on the individual. I mean, for me, for example, it's when I am at my most unkind when I'm not looking after myself properly, when I feel like I've taken on too much, when I've said yes to too many things and I'm stressed, and I take it out on everybody around me, usually my children.
That is not just you.
And it's never when, you know, oh my goodness, during lockdown, I was writing in a kindness journal and I'd said yes to a silly deadline while I was trying to do home learning with the kids. And I was honestly writing that kindness journal. I think I was the least kind I've ever been to my family, which they saw the irony of. My daughter was like, you're writing a book about kindness and you're really mean. What are you doing? And I was like, I just need 5 minutes to myself. And it's because I'd said yes to too many things. They were being a bit annoying, but they were just being children. And it wasn't about them. That was a classic example. It wasn't about what they were doing. It was completely about my state of mind. If I'd been in a good state of mind, I wouldn't have been shouty and angry at them all the time. So I think, you know, I'm very lucky. I've got a very supportive husband who you'll probably meet in a minute, because he's going to talk a little bit about what he does as well. When I get like that, he makes me go for a walk, and he makes me go for a big walk every day, actually. So maybe I get like that too much, but we often have a conversation where I say, I don't have time to go for a walk today. He's like, then you definitely need to go for a walk when I'm in that kind of state of mind. And for children, I mean, my goodness, my son's just been going through his SATs at school, and I can't tell you how many times I said to him, they don't matter. They don't matter. I don't care what you get. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But he feels pressure on it, and he's been in a really low quality of mind for about 3 weeks about it, which just frustrates me, because I think I don't say it to him obviously, but he's not going to perform as well when he's feeling like that at all. If he was all relaxed about it, and it's just so counterproductive to have that kind of pressure on yourself when you're trying to do something important. So I don't think I've answered your question at all, Robin, but I think it's very much individual of what that stuff is that goes on you. But whatever it is, it definitely makes you less productive, less happy, less kind.
Absolutely. I mean, that idea of actually having to be kind and compassionate to yourself, that's got a really strong research basis to it as well. I mean, Marty was talking about the kindness test, which was the big online questionnaire that we put together in partnership with the BBC. You know, we had over 60,000 people take part in that questionnaire. Amazing response. We never expected it to just attract that much attention. And it wasn't even like a two minute survey. I mean, it was, you know, it took a good half hour to do. It's tens of thousands of people who gave, I thought it was an act of kindness in itself. You know, they took the time to complete the questionnaire and share their thoughts about it. But that idea of being compassionate and kind to yourself came through really strongly. I mean, that's a big predictor of our mental health and well-being. It's not just about kindness to other people. And I guess what I want to do is to show that those two things are not in opposition to each other. It's not a trade-off. It's not like if you're kind to yourself, you're being totally egotistical and you don't care about anybody else. Of course not. You can be kind to yourself and kind to other people, and actually having the two together may be crucial. It might be that all the benefits, you know, you were talking about the benefits of being kind to others. Actually, some of that could be worn down if you're just constantly burnt out, not being able to look after yourself. So I think bringing those two things together is really helpful. But, you know, you were talking about the children and kind of what they're being told is really important, and at least feeling, even if you're telling them it doesn't matter, they're feeling that it does matter. The other thing I was feeling like, this might be another factor, is things that get in the way. Is like, what is it that we're striving to achieve in our lives? And even that word, achieve, I think is a really interesting one, right? So when you think about our definitions of success, and I think about this, I mean, my kids are older now. They're my youngest just about to do his A-levels, and then the other two in their 20s. And I think even just thinking back to their experience through school life, I don't think we ever really talk in our school system about what are we trying, you know, what are we wanting to do? What are we shooting for? You know, what are we striving for in our lives? Because I don't think kindness, relationships, well-being, mental health, I don't think those things get a look at. It's about, you know, having the right stuff, looking the right way, having the right, you know, academic results, you know, getting into the right university course, it might be, getting the right job, getting a well-paid job. All of those kinds of things become our markers of success. And I sometimes feel like maybe we need to kind of reappraise all of that. And I don't know, when you're working in schools, do you ever find that it's almost like you're talking at cross purposes, because you're talking about the importance of kindness, and then, well, that's not what success is. Success is, I don't know, being rich and having lots of followers.
Yeah, and kindness is just a little nice bit to do on the side. Yeah, I think I was asked to give a speech actually. It was at quite a posh girls' school. It was like the speech day thing where the A-level students were, I can't remember what it was called, you know what I mean? Basically they're all leaving, and I was supposed to give the end speech. And I was really nervous about it, because I thought, I wonder if because what I'm going to say, I don't know if that's what they want to hear. I don't know, because it was a very high achieving school.
Right.
And in my talk, I basically,
You want to kind of say that none of that counts.
I was like, none of that matters. Don't worry about what university you're getting into or what job you're going to have. Think about what kind of person you want to be. And I think it went down and they clapped. I don't know if they actually agreed with what I was saying, but they clapped. But because to me, it's just the most important thing in any job that you do. Oh my goodness, in anything that you do in life, it's what kind of person you are within that role and how you treat the people around you. That's what determines what kind of home life you have and what kind of community you live in, what kind of workplace you live in, what kind of life you have. I mean, I know people say it really flippantly that, you know, it's not about money and all that kind of stuff, but I think that most people still believe that it is and act as though it is. And definitely for children, I mean, I think we need to be, and it's really little things that I think people can do. It's constantly praising the things that you actually want, you know, when they demonstrate the character traits you want them to have. I mean, I praise my children for every little kind thing they do. And when we're when we're watching shows on TV or when we're reading books or whatever, I constantly point out when somebody's being kind or look at what that person did. I mean, my son on Saturday was in his football finals and he so wanted to win. He really, really cares a lot about winning. And he lost and he was devastated. He cried after the match. He was really upset because he really tried really hard and he was really frustrated. But in the match, one of his good friends took a penalty and missed it. And obviously his friend was devastated that he'd missed this penalty. And my son ran straight up to him and patted him on the back and gave him a hug. And I almost cried because I just thought, I mean, I did want him to win because I knew he really cared about it. But I just thought I was so proud of him and I cared more about that. I won't tell him this than actually if he'd won or not. I just thought how amazing, because he would have been really frustrated that his friend missed the penalty.
Yeah.
But his first thought was to go up and hug him. And I think the reason he did that is he has watched a lot of professional football. And when I feel like I'm taking credit for his kind act now, but when he watches people, you know, when the England football team, I'm showing my ignorance, whatever the game was where there was a few players who missed a penalty recently and it was a big deal. We were talking about how devastated they'd feel and how all their teammates went and cuddled them and all that kind of stuff afterwards. And we talk about things like that all the time. So when he went and did that for his friend, I felt more proud of that.
I think that's a lovely story, honestly, Jamie. I mean, that just shows it, doesn't it? And that was there, even in the context, maybe especially in the context of adversity, when he's frustrated about not getting the result, but actually being there for each other. The connections mean so much, don't they? And I think sports is just a great example of that, because, you know, sometimes people say, how can you afford to be kind? It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And, you know, yeah, kindness is all very well, but we've got to live in the real world. And I always feel like but there is space for kindness, even when you're being ultra competitive, maybe especially when you're being ultra competitive. Maybe there's really an important role for kindness and connecting with other people.
Isn't it interesting that people think that you need to, because I do get that sometimes. People say, well, yeah, but you need to teach kids to be tougher and to live in the real world, and everybody's not going to be. But that's the thing, we're raising children who are going to be, you know, they are the people, they are the world. So by teaching them to be compassionate and kind people, that's what the world becomes.
Exactly. Well, I mean, what a lovely message, really. And I guess the one thing I was going to ask you was, do you think that's changing at the moment? Are we on a positive trajectory? Are we on a negative trajectory, and we've got to do something about it? What's your feeling about that?
I think it's hard. I think you can start thinking, I mean, because I often feel like the world's just a wonderfully kind place because I'm surrounded often by very kind people, but I know that's not everybody's experience. I guess what I can be guided by is the schools that we work with. And I think there's definitely been, since COVID, a massive increase in the number of schools really focusing on children's well-being and mental health. And I mean, before COVID, we were working with 5,000 children a year, and last year we worked with 55,000 children. And we could have probably worked with double that number if we had the resources, because we had the demand from schools, and we were booked up till about November or December now, I think, from schools who want to to do more to help children with their mental health and well-being. And what I love is they see that kindness is a really good way to do that. The link is being made, I think. And also, I mean, there's a really strong focus, quite rightly, on anti-bullying in schools. During anti-bullying week, we always get a massive influx. We suddenly get hundreds of schools saying, can you work with this in this specific week? Which obviously can't do, but we've never positioned ourselves as an anti-bullying charity. We are part of a group of charities called the Anti-Bullying Alliance.
Yeah.
And we talk a little bit about bullying in our workshops, but we don't just want no bullying, we want kindness. So I feel like sometimes when we just talk about anti-bullying, it's stopping the negative, but you need something positive there to kind of counter it. So
yeah, because it's not the same, is it?
No, it's definitely
not having the negatives doesn't necessarily mean that you've got lots of the positives, but at the same time there is something really powerful about your message, Jaime, because I think what you're doing is inspiring people to think that actually sometimes addressing things which feel like really big, challenging, negative issues actually requires attention to the positive and bringing out the positives. And that was one of the things, I mean, in the kindness test, one of the things which we hadn't particularly expected, it wasn't like a big part of the questionnaire, but it really attracted lots of attention and got most of the attention in the press after we released the results, was the finding about COVID. So you mentioned about the increase in schools wanting to focus on kindness and well-being after during the COVID pandemic. And that's what we were finding as well, because we asked people whether they felt that the COVID pandemic had made a difference to levels of kindness, whether it had made people more kind, less kind, haven't changed it at all. And it wasn't the same in every country, but in the UK sample, which was the biggest part of the sample for the kindness test, we found more than two-thirds of people were saying that kindness increased, that COVID made people kind. And that was actually, in a sense, bucking the trend more generally, because a lot of people were saying that kindness has declined in their lifetimes, but COVID did something. And I wonder whether it is something like that reappraisal of, maybe I am overstating it, but maybe it is that reappraisal of what does it mean to be successful and what really counts. And maybe some of the stuff that we've been prioritizing, maybe we're losing the bigger picture, because what really counts is the relationships we have with each other.
Yeah, and because I think, all our normal life got stripped away, didn't it? And I think when you take away all of your normal life and all of our business and all the stuff we were focusing on before, we all had to slow down a bit. And well, obviously not all of us, if you're a frontline worker, you definitely weren't. But for the rest of us, we were forced to change our lives completely, suddenly all at home with our families. And I think also having a much greater appreciation for our situations, probably. I mean, I found lockdown a bit stressful, but I was constantly aware, and I was constantly reminding the children, we have a house, we have a garden, we have food in our fridge. There, especially through Digital Lives, the nominations we were getting during COVID were heartbreaking. We were, and carried on since COVID, but a lot of people fleeing domestic violence who needed help. A lot of people families all living in one room, in lockdown in one room of a family of 5. It just, I think it helped a lot of people realize what's really important, and also made people realize what other people are going through.
It's sort of like giving you a new frame of reference, isn't it? Because we're so used to the same old of whatever the routine is of our lives, and we can get really blinkered about it. And having this kind of massive disruption, because it was a massive disruption. I mean, disruption doesn't even feel like it captures it at all. But having that really shaking us out of that frame of reference and thinking, actually, it's not our normal routine at all, that probably does something. But my goodness, though, if you're dealing with that volume of interest, that must be really challenging. I mean, 55,000 kids. How are you even doing that?
It's been a massive reorganization. I can't even explain it. A massive reorganization of the way that we're working in terms of even just the simple things like our booking system. It used to be, you know, going back and forth, because it's hard sometimes, you know, teachers email and say we want a workshop on this date. By the time you give them dates, by the time they come back, those dates have gone, and it's all like, so doing that times about 1,000 was we had to improve our booking systems. But I think one of the really good things that COVID did for our School of Kindness is made virtual workshops an option.
Yes, that was the extraordinary discovery, right?
And that's why we can work with more kids. I mean, we've taken on more facilitators as well, but it was mainly the fact that we can do virtual, because I don't know that it was something that, or it's not something we would have considered doing before. And I don't think it was something that some schools would have been as open to doing before, because virtual always felt like a bit of a poor second to actually having someone there. But now for schools that are too far away that we might not be able to go to, or if we have too many schools, we can do virtual workshops much more quickly than we can. You know,
yeah, of course, yeah.
So it's just meant we could drastically increase the number of kids that we work with.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't know what your experience has been like, but I mean, the idea of being able to reach so many people in such a, you know, rapid pace, at such a rapid pace in such a short amount of time seems really powerful. I guess one of the things I was wondering about, just hearing you talk about that volume of interest, is, have there been things, and maybe I don't know, maybe Greg can talk about it as well. Have there been things along the way where you feel like actually that was really challenging, and I'm not even sure how we can address that problem in a school? Have there been any, you know, you were talking about situations where some schools maybe they just didn't feel like the kindness and the compassion were there in the community as a whole. Did you ever feel like, I don't know what to do here? Because I mean, we can tell our stories, we can share our ideas, but I'm not sure this is going to land.
I think Greg's just here. I was going to ask him that, but he's just, is he in the bath?
He's in the bath.
Okay. He's just put our 4-year-old in the bath, so he can't come and talk about it.
You can shout, Greg.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. We, yeah, there was an incident. So
I can answer. I'll answer for you.
You're let off.
I'll be right there. Okay.
Oh,
You can stop if you need me to.
It's all right. Don't worry. It's fine. That was good timing. I know that
that was supposed to be my smooth segue, but look what happened. Best laid plans, right?
I mean, Greg's worked in so many schools, and when he comes home, he often talks to me about the staff room environment, and he just said it's incredible. You know, he's been in hundreds of different schools, and he said it's incredible, the difference. And he said he can often tell what it's going to be like when he's running a workshop by the vibe in the staff room beforehand. And he said some of them, it's just, you know, as soon as he goes in, the teachers are like, oh, good luck, you know, whatever. And it's obviously teachers who are just feeling overworked, underappreciated, stressed. And this is just another thing they have to do, that kind of vibe. And there's other schools we go into where he said he went to a school last week, and he said every bit of the school seemed to be focused around well-being. It was like the snacks that were there for the teachers, the way the head teacher was talking to the staff. He just said this, and it
that's interesting.
It's such a big difference. It makes
such a big difference. But you know, I've become really interested in that from a kind of research perspective as well. I mean, I remember the experience of, I think a lot of parents have had this experience, right? Of, you know, the whole thing where you're looking at different secondary schools and you're thinking about which might be the right school for my son or my daughter. And you're trying to pick up on those vibes, exactly those intangible qualities that you go from one place to another. You kind of pick up on what it feels like. And that intangible quality, I want to pin that down. And maybe that's a kind of a naive optimism about what we can do with science, but I feel like it shouldn't be intangible. We should be able to capture it in some way. But that's kind of it, isn't it? Like what Greg was saying about the staff room, what it's feeling like in the staff room. You can point to some things, but I guess the follow-up question then is, in those situations where he has encountered a staff room where it feels like, oh, well, good luck, that kind of an attitude, and it feels like, well, those intangible qualities focused on kindness aren't there. It's a different kind of intangible quality. Are those no-hopers? Or does he feel like actually, you can make a difference? Even if it's a small difference, you can make a difference? Or do we just throw our hands up and say, can't do anything with that school?
I think you can always make a difference. It's not ideal because it's hard if we then leave and what we're talking about. Although sometimes I think the fact that a school's gotten us in means they care about kindness. So that's that's great to start with. Or that, even if it's just ticking a box on the curriculum, it's fine. They've got us in there anyway. But I think, I remember things during my schooling career where little things that I was taught, I don't even know at the time, they didn't seem a big deal to me, but they stuck in my head. So I always think sometimes when Greg comes home and after he's done a workshop, sometimes he goes, I'm not really sure they were that engaged. I always say to him, if one kid there, it sounds really cheesy, but I'm like, if one kid there remembers what you said, that can make a huge difference to somebody's life. And often in the workshops, he tells me stories about kids who come up to him and tell him something privately, like, oh yeah, my dad's been doing it, my dad's been going through a hard time as well. Or because sometimes we give them a practical task in the workshop where we tell them about a real person going through a hard time, and it might be a child who's seriously in hospital, or it can be anything, a child who's being bullied in another school. And when we're telling them stories about people going through hard times, they often then start talking about different things that are going on in their own lives, and I guess they feel like it's an environment they can share in. And
really powerful. I mean, I'm curious to know, has that started to happen with some of the adults in the school as well?
Yeah, much more privately, but Greg gets a lot of messages from teachers afterwards as well, about different things that are going on in their lives. Or he does have a vibe about him of somebody that you can confide in. So people often share with him a lot. We always say he's like a child whisperer as well. Even if we're like on a train or on an airplane, anything, children just come up to him and and start talking to him. He has that vibe about him, I guess. So so I think it's lovely that even if it's for a couple of hours, there is that vibe in the school where children feel like they can open up and talk about kindness and friendships, and if they're having a hard time or whatever it might be.
See, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because what you're doing is you're creating a space for trust. Right, because that's what the confiding part is actually trusting that you can talk to someone. And obviously Greg's inspiring and evoking that trust. I mean, when you think about what can we do to bring about change, I mean, Greg can't be everywhere all the time, right? To be that trusted person. And, it sounds like he's absorbing a lot from all the places he's going to, my goodness. But I mean, what does it come down to? Leadership then? Is it all down to the leaders of organizations to kind of be responsible for creating that trusting environment? Or is it something that everyone does together? Like, I sometimes go back and forth between thinking, in the end, it needs to start with the leader. Sorry, in the end, it needs to start. But you have to have the starting point of the leader really buying into this and saying, yes, this is really important, and giving permission, if you like, to everybody else. But then there's another part of me that just feels, gosh, isn't that really hierarchical? Why does it have to start with a leader? Surely everybody can be empowered to bring about change in whatever environment they're inhabiting. Well, what do you think?
I mean, it's much easier if it starts with the leaders, because then it sets the tone for the, in terms of even who they hire, the policies, the way that they talk to staff, all of that kind of thing, what they get staff to focus on. I think it's much easier if the leaders bought into it and decides they want this kind of culture in their school. But I think whatever environment you're in, it can be harder, but your behavior, it has a ripple effect. So your behavior is going to help create the kind of environment that you're working in. I mean, I've worked in, oh my goodness, when I first moved to the UK, I was brought up in Australia. When I first moved to the UK, I was a journalist, and I worked for a business magazine, and it's the worst environment I've ever been in my life. I used to cry in the toilets every day. From Sunday morning, I used to start feeling sick because I didn't want to go in. And it was to do with the leadership of it was the editors I worked for were just really mean people, and I think they thought that was tough. That's how you treat your staff, and it just made me hate it. And I then wasn't performing very well, I don't think, and ended up quitting without a job to go to.
But you've got to wonder, is that going to be the successful way to run the business? And actually, all the evidence from the work in organizational psychology is telling you absolutely not, right? That can't be the right way. And in fact, all the evidence suggests that any organization, even in a really what you might describe as a kind of cutthroat world or cutthroat sector, maybe especially in those environments, kindness and compassion are important. And it shouldn't be the case that just because you've got an environment where you really do have to be agile because it's a very, very competitive industry, that somehow that takes away from being kind. Actually, kindness becomes ever more important in that environment.
Well, and the thing is, I think sometimes leaders see it as, you know, kind of more of a weak part of the business. Oh yeah, we will, you know, but if it's not, because if, for example, if my editors had been more supportive and kinder, I would have definitely been more creative, and I would have been much more willing to take risks. I wouldn't have taken as many sick days because I was at home crying because I didn't want to come into the office. I would have been happier and more productive.
Exactly.
So I think we need to help. There just needs to be a greater understanding among the people who are running companies, schools, everything, that creating a kind work environment where people feel supported and where there's compassion is going to be a better and more productive, financially more lucrative environment.
Exactly. And you know, similar kind of thing, I mean, not quite the same, but similar kind of thing when I'm talking about working in schools and thinking about, like that point I was saying, I don't have any time for feelings because I've got to get on with my history syllabus, because actually it's saying that getting on with the history syllabus in many cases is going to be benefited by having a really positive culture of kindness and positive relationships. Talking of which, I'm looking at the time, Jamie, I mean, we could talk forever, couldn't we? But we've got lots of questions coming in. Am I doing the right thing, Marty?
Yeah, so don't you worry about the questions, you relax. And I want to say thank you so much to both of you, and honestly I would have happily spoke to you for the rest of listened to you for the rest of the evening. So many important things to be said and that you have said, so thank you so much for that. And you're right, there's lots and lots of questions, so I was going to actually start with Theo, who I can see. Theo, are you happy to ask your question? I'll ask you to unmute if I can. There we are. Oh no, you've mute. I'll try again. Sorry, Theo.
Can you hear me? I'm so sorry. Thank you very much. I have no idea how that that thing appeared up here, but anyway, thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful talk. Fantastic work that you're both doing. Congratulations, and thank goodness. Thank goodness. I'm from a background in HE, and one of the things that we've done, the Compassion in HE network, with now staff from 70 universities signed up, including the wonderful Dr. Marty, Dr. Marty right here, is we have put compassion not as an emotion, but as noticing, being vigilant to the distress of yourself or others, and then doing something wise about it that will silence and hurt nobody. And the context for that is not the fire service, which actually uses that. Be vigilant to distress, harm, do something wise about it. And the health service as well. But the context in education for us in HE is group work, teamwork. Because of widening participation, we are handing out group work to everybody in order to cope with the huge numbers, 1,200 students on a single module here at the moment. And the context is group work, and we are putting that onto the degree curriculum so that we know that the two most difficult behaviors that arise in teamwork according to hundreds of students are monopolizing and withdrawing. These are the two threat system things. It would be absolutely superb to get this kind of education into schools. You are absolutely pioneers there. In other words, what we're saying is that on degrees now in our 5-year strategy in that university, and will be checked out by the government, accountable to the government through the OFS, that we're going to put the cognitive skills of compassion onto the degree curricula, and we want it rolled out across the whole university. From my education friends, I can't see any way in through the SAT system, and somehow we've managed to break through a little bit through the cognitive skills, the legitimizing of students to have these compassion skills that they have been developing for at least 200,000 years. What is the way in for schools, do you think? to talk this language of the institution is so difficult, I know. Any ideas?
It's a great question, Theo, and it is challenging when you feel like the accountability framework that every school leader is battling with actually puts pressure on other things and makes it like really difficult to create space for compassion and kindness. But I think there are ways in. So the kind of work that I've been involved in for many years now is focused on social and emotional learning, which is all about social emotional competencies. And that has received increasing attention. And there's a lot of national work, international work going on in that space. Probably the biggest route in now is around mental health specifically, because for the last few years, especially, there's been a growing concern about mental health difficulties in children and young people. Now, we're not there yet because part of the difficulty at the moment is that this has been turned into a narrative which is all about which individual children are showing early signs of problems. Let's find those children and put in place some strategy to be able to, in a sense, fix them, to be able to get, I don't know, it might be some early therapeutic support, it might be school counseling, and all of that I think is really important, but it's not the whole picture, right? Because my point is, this isn't just about figuring out which individual children have problems. That makes it look like mental health is just sitting inside their heads, when it's really the relational network that we need to be paying attention to. What's the
children are very
relational...
good at hiding the signs, very good at hiding the signs of their distress.
Exactly. So we need to pay attention to what the environment is like for everybody. And so, you know, the phrase that people are increasingly focusing on now is this idea of a whole school approach to mental health, which is much more than just identifying which individual children have difficulties. And I think, Jamie, I mean, coming back to the work that you're doing, it's not about, you know, pinpointing individual children that need an intervention, is it? It's about transforming the environment for everybody.
I know, and sometimes when we go into schools, I had a teacher once say, half jokingly, but obviously she was joking, should we just get the kids that we think need it? The unkind kids do the kindness workshop. You know, and Robin, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I know I've heard you talk before about the interventions needed in schools, and and I completely agree. Obviously, it's really important to have some of those extra interventions for the children who are really struggling, but it has to be a whole school approach. You can't have an environment that is, you know, completely anti everything well-being and then hope that a child who has mental health issues is going to be okay because they get a little bit of intervention. It just doesn't work like that. It has to be.
It's everybody. It's everybody, everyone.
Thanks, guys, and thanks, Theo. We've got JR.
Hi.
Hi, JR.
Yeah, it's a shared computer, so we've got initials going on in our house. My name's Jenny Rice. I am a social worker and also now teach in a further and higher education college just outside Belfast. I suppose my experience has been with some of our young people who have been traumatized, who've shared some of that with us in the classroom. They're often resistant to the kindness or the compassion that other tutors and myself share. And they're often confused by that. They've never received that without needing something in return. And it's how we can continue to encourage them to welcome that and receive that. I really struggle with continually providing the kindness and compassion, yet some of our young people, I have some 16-year-olds that I'm teaching, they really struggle with receiving that. They're not entirely sure how to welcome that. They're not sure what to do with it. I think they kind of like the idea of someone being kind to them, but they're just not entirely sure if it's altruistic or there's some other reason for it.
That's so interesting. That's a great point. And it's a really subtle but important difference that you're pulling out here, because it's not just about, you know, encouraging children to be more kind. It's also about participating in kind interactions, and that means receiving as well as giving. And sometimes, I mean, I've done a lot of research over the years with, for example, sometimes I've done a lot of work with very socially anxious young kids who really struggle with receiving any positive response from others, because it's almost like they discount the positivity. There must be, I didn't deserve it, or when if they spend more time in there, they'll find out, and you know, they won't mean it, or even worse, they'll say actually they don't mean it at all, they're just laughing at me. Yeah. Jaime, what have you encountered that issue when you've been working in schools? Because so much of what you do with 52 Lives is about these really inspirational acts of giving and caring for others, and you know, doing something for other people. But have you looked in the work that you've done in schools at the other side of what we just heard about receiving kindness?
I mean, we talk about it a bit with the children, but I think where I've mainly seen it is our work with actually 52 Lives with the people that we've helped. Because the people that we help are nominated by other people, normally social workers. 99% of our nominations come from social workers, and the people are obviously granted permission for us to help them, but sometimes it is really challenging to find out the truth about what they need, because they don't want to say what they need, or they don't think they deserve help, or they say, no, just help somebody else. I don't, you know, I'm sure there's somebody else who needs it more than me, or they feel really uncomfortable about the fact that somebody's doing something nice for them. And you know, they're often people who have been treated really horribly, or have been through a lot of trauma in their life, and it's not a normal emotion, I guess, for them. They're just not used to it. They're not used to somebody wanting to do something nice. I mean, there was a lady that we helped who it was in the early days of the charity, when we weren't, you know, we didn't have a proper website probably and all of that, and we weren't registered yet as a charity actually, and I've never been more suspicious of what we were trying to do. And it took a lot of effort. We ended up having to go, so there was a lady who'd been conned, and we were raising money to give her back the money that she'd lost. It was an elderly lady. We ended up having to get the police who were working with her to kind of vouch for us and say we're okay, because she was so distrustful of somebody showing her kindness. And I think, I know your question is, you know, how can you help those kind of people receive kindness? It's a really hard question, and I don't think my answer is going to be very helpful, but I just think keep doing it, keep being kind, because even if they're resistant to it, it will be getting through little bits at a time, and they probably feel like they don't deserve it because they've never been treated with that kind of love and compassion. But I think the only way you can help get through to people who are in that state is keep being loving and compassionate and kind to them.
Thank you. It's the small drip, 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 and hopefully they feel that wash at some point. And we're fortunate to see some of our young people return, and they are grateful for that. And you might not see it immediately, but they'll maybe say something in 5 or 10 years, and you see them in the street and they're happy to cross the road to speak to you rather than avoid you. So yeah, we'll keep going. Thank you.
I think sometimes with kindness and compassion, it's a long game. Sometimes I think the things that you're doing, you won't necessarily see the results, immediate results of somebody going, wow, thanks, you've changed my life. It's the kind of 5-10 years down the road.
Because it's about trust in each other, isn't it? And that sometimes can take a long time to change. But I mean, any kind of an impact you're making to make, again, I'm using the word make, but to help people to feel like actually they can trust in the community and they can trust in the people around them, that generalized sense of trust, I think that's got to be a really positive thing. And
that there are good people in the world. I mean, the Help 52 Lives, we give people tangible help, but we also, people in our community also send lots of kind messages for the people we're helping, because not everyone can afford to give donations and things, so they write messages. And the people we help always say that it was those messages that actually meant more to them. We gave them, we give them like carpet or furniture, whatever it is, to help their practical situation. But the lovely messages we get back from the people we help, it's always things like, you've given me faith in humanity again. You've helped me see that there are good people out there when I'd lost hope. It's just helping people shift their perspective a little bit on the world. When, if they've been surrounded by people who are treating them badly and their experience of the world has been negative, just that little shift in their state of mind to say maybe the world's okay is so powerful.
Thanks, Jaime. Thank you. And Priya.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Robin. That was really interesting. My background is in mental health and well-being, and a lot of the research I'm doing at the moment is in that area in children and young people. I just wondered if you thought kindness is often overlooked, because it wasn't really something that I'd come across. when considering mental health and well-being in children and young people. And just to put it into context, I'm currently working on an evaluation of the Timpson programme on trauma and attachment awareness in schools. So there's a lot of overlap in what you're talking about in the whole school approach to making sure everyone in the school is aware of how to work in a more relational way. And actually thinking about the relational ways that teachers, school staff, so that includes, you know, dinner ladies, lunchtime supervisors, admin staff, thinking about the relational ways that they kind of interact with those children and young people. I'm thinking kindness could be brought in there as well and link in with that attachment and trauma. So just, yeah, wondered what you thought about having kindness as just kind of a standalone thing that we're trying to sort of talk to people about, or could it be incorporated in things that are already happening?
I think that's a really great question, and that's exactly where I am, Priya. I think it can be incorporated into what's already happening, because it's not as though it's actually new. I mean, in the research area and in the science, it is relatively new. There isn't all that much which has been using that label, but in practice, I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, of course, it is, because as soon as you take a relational approach, and if you're taking a kind of a trauma-informed approach, if you're focusing on attachment, or if you're focusing on people's relationships, and you're focusing on mental health and well-being, well, all of that is socially situated. And we know, and there is really good evidence for it, that kind and cooperative behavior and compassion towards each other, those are really fundamental for our relationship. So I guess I would say, absolutely, do find ways to incorporate into what you're already doing or what's already out there. And I'm sure Jamie's had the same experience as well, that I don't think that the work that you and Greg have been doing in schools and all the other facilitators you've got now, I don't think any of that is kind of sitting in a silo separate from everything else the school is doing. It's all about integrating it. One thing I would say is that quite often when you're working in this space, people can somehow think that, well, kindness is just a bit soft and fluffy. You know what I mean? That it's not serious, and that mental health, well, you need something much more serious. And I would say that this is kind of my mission, because, you know, to be honest, I kind of had that same reaction. It was actually a postgraduate student of mine, Jess Cotney, who did her PhD with me on this topic. She had come up to me and said she really enjoyed the work that I was doing and found there was a lot of inspiring stuff in there, but I wasn't using the word kindness. And she asked me the question, couldn't we look at this through the lens of kindness? And we did. And I remember being a little bit skeptical at first, because I was thinking, well, it's not gonna take off in the same way. And I was just proved wrong. And I remember the very first study that we did working in a secondary school, I was thinking, really, we're going to be working with 15-year-olds talking about kindness? Oh, that's just not going to take it seriously. And I'll tell you what, I have done so many sessions with young people focusing on mental health and well-being, and I think they really liked having a different focus on kindness. They were getting at mental health and well-being, but it was through something, it just felt intuitive to them. They could talk, actually, they talked in a really nuanced way about it, really sophisticated. They know what it feels like when someone's kind to them. They know what it feels like when someone's unkind to them, and they could immediately connect with each other about it. So, yeah, sorry, that's a very long answer, but it's to say, absolutely, go for it, Priya.
And I think, you know, Priya, when, so if Greg wasn't looking after our child, he would have told us himself, but the way that Greg found his way to running our kindness workshops was he really struggled a lot in his life. He had cancer when he was a child, and he had cancer again when he was an adult. He's got deep vein thrombosis. He's got, on paper, he's a medical nightmare. You wouldn't know to look at him. He looks very fit and healthy. But his biggest challenge was with his mental health. After he recovered from cancer the second time, he was in a really bad state mentally. He had severe anxiety. He couldn't leave the house. He started getting eczema. He wasn't sleeping. He tried so many different types of therapy, and nothing was really working for him. And he ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD, which he was then really confused about, because he's like, it's not like I've been to war. Why? He didn't feel like he was almost deserving of a PTSD diagnosis. He's like, I haven't been through enough trauma to have PTSD. And he went traveling and set up this amazing blog called 101 Things to Do When You Survive, which is all about giving people hope and recovering from illness and stuff. And his idea was that he would tick off all these things from his list. He had this anti-bucket list of things that he wanted to do in the world. So he went around the world and did all these things. And he said none of them really made him feel better. He thought that going around and doing all these things would make him feel better. And his second year that he was away, he did a lot of volunteering. He devoted a lot of the time to helping other people. He worked in different children's refuges, and he was building fences for homeless communities, and he was doing all this kind of stuff. And he said that's when he started feeling better. And he's done loads of reading and research into the mind and the body and what helps us get through trauma and that kind of thing. And he said he realized that it was kindness and helping people that helped him feel better. And he'd tried everything. He'd tried every type of therapy in the world, and he couldn't believe that it was something that simple. He was like, but it was kindness, basically. It was him doing something which I think took him out of his own head for a bit, and it completely helped him feel better.
Such an amazing story, Jamie, and shows the power of connecting with other people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really,
he tried all these very sophisticated interventions, and for him, I mean, obviously different things work for different people, but for him, it was just doing things to help other people helped him feel so much better.
Wow.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. I just wanted to comment that we have Martha here from Frome, from the Kindness Festival. So I just want to give them a shout out, because we had Julie and Abel at the festival, and the work that they've done in Frome in terms of the Compassion Project is just incredible. So hi, Martha, you're all awesome out there in Frome. I'm going to ask Sandra now if she'd like to ask her question. Oh, there you are, Sandra. And we can't hear you. I don't know why, because I've unmuted you. Strange. Let me see if I can, if you keep trying to talk, I'll see if I can find your actual question. If it's here. Loads of questions. Sandra, I've got it, yeah. Our school was fortunate enough to take part in one of the virtual School of Kindness assemblies. It's created a real buzz around kindness in our school. We were also lucky enough to win Buddy Bench prize, so the kindness ripple continues. Thank you so much. So it was a thank you, Sandra. Oh, can we hear you now? No. So sorry, Sandra.
I love the idea of the kindness ripple effect, though, as well. I mean, I guess that's what you're seeing every single day, right, Jamie, in the work that you're doing, because you're seeing the kindness just growing and growing through reaching all of the different schools. I think that's so beautiful.
Well, honestly, and some of the little projects we've started, I feel like I've got one of the best jobs in the world. But we have something called a kindness fund, where children can apply for little bits of funding if they have an idea to spread kindness in their school or community, because we wanted them to feel like we're in there trying to encourage them to be kind. So we wanted them to feel like if they do have an idea, that it would be supported. So we can give, it's up to £250 we can give children via their schools for funding. And some of the ideas and things they've come up with to create different kindness clubs. There's children that have started litter picking clubs to try and be kind to animals. There's all these different things happening, and it's just that little spark that you ignite sometimes. And we've started doing as well, we have something called a Kids Kindness Club, where every fortnight kids get sent this newsletter, and it's a video of Greg giving them a kindness challenge for the week, and it's always around a different theme. But we started after Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was I think at the same time there was floods in Australia, and the news just felt really heavy and awful, and we were trying to think of how to deal with that, especially for children watching that. So we started something in our Kids Kindness Club video now. There's a kind news segment where it's Greg with a really dodgy Northern Irish accent. I don't know why he's decided to go Northern Irish when he does his Kindness Club news, but it's kind news with Ned Kindlebottom or something, and it's just different. It's a good news spin on what's going on in the world. So we point out all the people that are helping and all the good stuff that's going on. But kids have started sending us in their own versions and their own kind news, and we've had videos of kids dressed in suits at news desks and things like that. They have to report on whatever kind news they've seen that week, and it's just so lovely, because it's just trying to, it seemed like just a silly little thing we were doing, and we didn't know if kids would like it or not, but it's just getting them to look for the good that's happening in the world, and to realize that whatever they're reading about, there's always good stuff happening as well.
Well, you know what? I love that. And that actually connects with some really nice recent research. We were delighted this year to welcome a new member of faculty to our School of Psychology at Sussex, Gillian Sandstrom. And she is now directing our newly relaunched Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness. And Gillian has just published a really fascinating paper looking at how we engage with social media. And she was looking at the phenomenon of, have you used this phrase doom scrolling, where you could just go through one negative story after another on social media. And she was showing that actually doom scrolling is associated with, some negative consequences in terms of how people are actually feeling themselves. It really can get us down. But what was so lovely was in the study and in the paper that she wrote on the study, she and her colleagues were using the phrase kindness scrolling. And I love that, because there is something that we can do in terms of just noticing, recognizing, celebrating, valuing the kindness around us. Sometimes even in the most horrific circumstances, paying attention to the positives becomes as important, maybe even more important.
Sorry, Jamie, you go.
I was going to say, I just love that Greg and I come up with some kind of random ideas and try out with kids. You actually have proper research that I can now use to justify our...
That's the partnership, right?
All of that to explain why we now have Kind News with Ned Kindlebotham.
And that's why the salon is so brilliant. When we bring these conversations together, I'm so delighted. And I just want to say as well that when we're talking about effective kindness and even talking about kindness, everyone that I'm looking at in the room that has their picture on is smiling. So that's that is a beautiful and simple effect. Now we've got a question here from Karen. I think it's more a comment, but she's saying this sounds like such a good thing to start in junior school and starting from the bottom up. But I think that really is, Jamie, would you say that as you are talking about junior, I get confused because it's slightly different in Scotland, but it's primary, junior, secondary.
Well, we work with, at the moment, Key Stage 1 and 2, so it's years 1 to 6 at the moment, so ages about 6 to 11, but we have just started developing a workshop for early years, so 4 and 5-year-olds, which is challenging. It's obviously a much more simple workshop, but it's just getting the basic fundamentals there. But Greg recently, actually Greg's here.
I'm here.
Greg's here now. Greg,
hello everyone, sorry.
Greg, last week actually, he ran a workshop. We were asked to run a workshop for year 7 and 8, which we don't normally do, so Key Stage 3. And you did it for the first time last week, didn't you?
I did, yeah. It was interesting. It was the same. I kept the format the same as the ones for Key Stage 1 and 2. But obviously my delivery was just a bit more grown up and a bit more serious. But it worked really well. And, because a lot of what we're talking about is the science of kindness, as you've probably already chatted about. But it is, the thing is, a lot of the children don't know this, and a lot of the adults don't do this. So when I'm delivering a workshop, I'm speaking as much to the teachers as I am to the children, because that's it. And I'm sure this is what you've just been discussing, but we have to create that culture of kindness. We have to create that culture of well-being, and the teachers are the ones modeling this to the children. So they need to be aware of their language, their actions, the way they're treating the children, and this is how the children are going to learn. So it's very much, I don't pinpoint it at the teachers, but it's very much, this is what we all need to be doing, because this is the society that we want. We want a kind, healthy society, and education and modeling is going to be pivotal in creating that.
I love that idea. So that it's almost like you're going into the school, and it's very much like you've been invited to go in and do presentation and workshops with the children, but actually secretly you're changing the world.
Exactly.
Well, we do make sure, don't you? You do make sure that the teachers are in the workshop, because I think sometimes, and I know teachers are very busy, sometimes it's like, well, there's somebody else running the workshop now. I can go and do all the other bits I need to do, but we really try and encourage the teachers to be in the workshop, because if they're not listening to what we're teaching the kids, it's very hard for them to keep reinforcing it after we go.
That's it. And even with my well-being talks as well, I make a point of letting people know, I'll come in and I'll give a talk for an hour, or I'll run a workshop for a couple of hours, but then that's it. I'm gone, and it's up to whoever's listening to choose whether or not they implement any of the things that I've talked about. But with children, that's it. It's not a starting point, because schools are already doing things around this, but it's very much this is how important this is, and we need to capitalize on that and enhance and improve and build upon all these things that we're doing, because, you know, we've all watched a TED talk and be inspired, but the next day we're back into our habits, you know, and we haven't followed on with what we've learned there. And it's going to take repetition to create these neural pathways that are leading to these positive habits that are going to benefit everyone, let alone the health and well-being of our children.
Have you ever found that response from schools or staff members where they say, well, that's all very well, but we just don't have time for it. We just do not have time. We're under so much pressure. Have you encountered that?
Yeah, sadly, I have. And you know what really, really upsets me, I think, Robin? I think teaching and education is the most important job on the planet. And we are overworking our teachers. We're not looking after our teachers. I go into so many schools and I see teachers burned out. I was at a school the other day and all the teachers there were supply teachers. And we can't have that. We have to be looking after ourselves and practicing all these things. And it is in there, there's so many tick boxes. And I come from a police background, so I understand the changes of procedures and protocols and all these PDRs and things that we have to fill in and these tick boxes. But it can't be like that. And this needs to be something, whether it's kindness, whether it's emotional intelligence, growth mindset, whatever that is, that needs to be built upon within schools. And that needs to be both, you know, those things need to be educated to the children, but it also needs to be modeled. And we've got to have time for these things. Otherwise, we are going to struggle.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, guys. We have so many questions. We're going to have another salon part 2. But what I want to say, because I'd like to, if I can, Harriet, could you nod your head if this is okay? Because I'd like to bring you in a second just to talk a little bit about kindness and what the University Chaplaincy are doing at Edinburgh. But firstly, I want to say thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you, Greg, for coming in there at the end. We're going to have the salon just for you now, so thank you. Thank you to all our salonistas for tonight. We'll save the chat because there's so many wonderful comments about the amazing things that your work has done, Jamie and Greg, and also about your wonderful work as well, Robin. So I'm just going to hand over to Harriet because I think she might have a few things to say. I'll just have to unmute you. There you go.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. It's been such a fabulous conversation. I've been so delighted, and one of the things that's really firing off in me is about culture change. You know, so when there are schools that aren't getting it, and it's not coming in from the top, and one of the reasons it's important that it comes from the top wherever else it comes is that if it isn't coming from the top, then people can feel they're going to be punished.
Yeah.
You know, from higher up above them. And so that's a real blocker, isn't it? That fear of punishment and recrimination for behaving in a certain way. But I wanted to say something about the time issue, because I quite often with Marty and also elsewhere, I quite often do compassion trainings, and often with medical consultants. And that question comes up a lot, as it does in businesses as well. It's like, we just haven't got time for this. And we know that doctors are really rushed off their feet. But there's fabulous research that shows how time-saving it is to be compassionate or to be kind. You know, how much it deepens the quality of an interaction. So, for example, there's fabulous research showing that medical consultants, when they have a kind demeanour and touch the edge of the bed on the ward round before they leave, the patients think they've had 15 minutes with the doctor when in fact they've only had 8. I mean, isn't that amazing? Wow. You can almost save half your time by having a deep enough quality interaction. And kindness doesn't usually take more time. It's more about the demeanour you have in an interaction. So the crucial thing, I think, is about people thinking about their energy, how they conserve their energy so that they've got the energy to have the depth of the interaction, rather than have they got enough minutes in the day. It's have you got enough emotional energy to do that. And then and that's where the self-care becomes really important, doesn't it? So that your battery doesn't deplete. So those are just a few thoughts I had. But I also have a big plea put in my mind by Jaime mentioning Ukraine, which is that at the chaplaincy we're running an initiative called Guerrilla Peace Ukraine, which is both in real life and virtual. So in real life, people are planting sunflowers in a guerrilla way all over the place, like down the highways in America, etc. And lighting candles, of course, and showing symbols. And then virtually, they're showing on the online map where they're doing this, so that the map itself becomes a way of tracking the hope and vigilance and solidarity. And what we're hearing from our students is that all of those things are making a massive difference, because they're really frightened that they're being forgotten, that the war's being forgotten, that everyone's got used to it now, that the news has moved on. And of course, they're all suffering hugely. And it's just well, we all know it's a terrible situation. So I wondered if we could have an online act, a collective act. Obviously, you don't feel you have to do it, but if you were inclined to have a collective act online to go onto the map and sort of plant a sunflower on the map at the website to sort of share the solidarity and track it around the country and around the world. So depending on where you're from. Is that okay with folk? And Marty, I've slightly crashed in with that idea.
It's funny, you crashed in. That's absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Harry. I don't know if Robin and Jaime would like to say some last words before I finish with the poem.
Well, I only want to say thank you so much for inviting us onto this wonderful salon. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. As always, Jaime and Greg, really lovely to speak with you both. I feel like there's such a great connection between what we're doing, and just wonderful to all the people who've come in on the salon today. Such really interesting questions and inspiring words from everybody. So I think we do have a kind of a movement here, and I love what you started with, Jaime, about saying that it's not like we're injecting anything new. It's actually we're unlocking something, and that's really empowering. So thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Robin. Jaime and Greg?
Just to echo what Robin said, it's exactly right. What we're teaching is not a new thing. Kindness is not a new thing. It's just about, it's just about shining a light on it and drawing people's attention to help people all realize, because collectively it's how we want to live. Everybody wants to live in a kind environment. We all want to work in a kind school. So I feel like we've got the collective want to do it. We just have to, I guess, create environments where it's valued and where it's seen as being the most important thing, not as an added extra.
Thanks, Jaime. Thank you so very much. So this is a chosen poem by Jaime, Everyone We Know by Nikita Gill. I wonder how many people I know out there, battling demons and leviathans alone on this cold night. How many people I know who tell me they are fine and know how to expertly hide the cry for help behind their eyes. How many are just a helping hand away from a moment that could better their entire life? And how many will never ask, instead ball up these terrible things inside themselves, thinking they are all alone in their fight. It is a sobering thought. Everyone we love and know and hate are all suffering in some great or small way. This is why we must be swift with our kindness, make greater efforts at compassion when we ask someone if they are okay. Thanks, everyone. Brilliant evening. Thank you.
Thank you.